What's up again, everybody? Today we're going to have a good time. We're going to have some fun. I'm going to go through the Tales of Aria set. In fact, I already have. I've gone through the Tales of Aria set, and I've gone through every, subclass of card. All of the Runeblade, all of the Guardian, all of the Ranger cards, all of the elements, and I even went through the pulses. And I chose a card from each of those that I thought was perhaps underpowered. Maybe they could have gone a little further with this card. Unfortunately, it doesn't quite do enough personally for me to really want to play a ton of it, or just to play it a lot in decks. So I've picked one card like that, and then I've picked one card from that same group that is overpowered, a card that I love, a card that I think does a ton, a card that you should definitely put into your decks if you're building with these, heroes or classes, stuff like that. So we're doing an underpowered, overpowered kind of breakdown of the Tales of Aria set by class. So sit back, relax, while I walk you through my picks for underpowered and overpowered in Tales of Aria. If you'd like to play along, put your own thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Maybe try to guess which cards I've picked for each subclass and group of cards, and let's jump into it. All right, we're starting with Guardian, and we have Oaken Old. I think Oaken Old is a little bit underpowered. It's one of those cards that I saw and I was like, man, that looks really beautiful. It looks cool. It's got an awesome effect. Earth-Ice Fusion just really hurts it. More often than not, this is a 3 for 7, which you can get on a lot of common cards. Now, if you can fuse this, it's fantastic. Of course, you get the +2 dominate, and if it hits, then it blows up their hand, basically. But oftentimes, you're not fusing this unless you've set it up, and that's kind of what he wants to do as Oldhim. You want to set up your turns, and you want to play control. So, I mean, in that sense, it is tailor-made for him. Unfortunately, it's just not as consistent as, just drawing it and then playing it on the next turn. And so, to me, this card is underpowered. But you know what card is not underpowered in the Guardian class, and that includes Elemental Guardian? Tear Asunder. This card is incredible. It was gonna be incredible when they announced it. It was like, this card's stupidly good. You just play this down, and this applies to literally any attack that you make, and that includes the weapon. So if you're attacking with Titan's Fist, Winter's Wail, or probably best Anothos. Anothos for 6 plus the +1 from this and Dominate comes across for 7 with Dominate, and if it hits, they discard 2 cards. It's disgusting. This is a really good Guardian card. This should go into every Guardian deck. It's almost universally you would never not play this, even if you're playing super control. This is one of those times where, you're drawing into your hands and you're blocking a lot, you're playing defense reactions, you're pitching away to trigger an Oldhim effect, or, just blocking with Bravo, and then you find a Tear Asunder and you go, okay, this is the point where I'm going to play this down and pivot a little bit of the tempo into my favor. So this is my overpowered pick for Guardian from Tales of Aria. Now jumping over to Ranger, and unfortunately, Seek and Destroy is just a little bit underpowered. I will say this. I'll be very specific. Seek and Destroy, I think, has the capacity to be good down the line. If we can use this effect, which I'll let you read through, it's going to give +3 at the very least, which is really good. If we can use this effect in conjunction with other on-hit arrows, and then we get just more proliferation of on-hit effects that are very scary, or that can combo with this, I think this becomes a great buff later. Plus, if this hits a hero at the beginning of their next end phase, they discard all their cards in their hand and destroy all of their cards in arsenal. That is going to be a beautiful effect if we get into a meta that is all about setup. And right now, that could exactly be what we're heading into. So there is hope for this card, but I think on the face of it, this card, and particularly in a draft or a sealed scenario, which we've seen both of these callings recently be, this just doesn't quite have a power level that you can consistently just jam down and know that it's going to wreck house. It's really just going to push 3 damage, and the on-hit effect right now is sort of inconsequential. Could be good down the line, though, so keep it in mind. Right now, perhaps a little underpowered. But Shiver is not. Shiver is so stinking good. Shiver is the more I've played with Shiver, the more I'm I kind of just want to build Lexi and play Shiver, because dominating arrows especially if you're playing like Ice Lexi and you're just dominating large arrows that you've buffed and that have scary on-hit effects like forcing cards out of your opponent's hands. It's just really stinking good. I mean, Voltaire plus the, with the Go Again is fine. And then there's, of course, like the combo that you can do with Death Dealer and Snapshot. But all of that, in my opinion, is sort of ancillary to the idea that Shiver giving Dominate is just incredible. And the fact that this is not a chase card, that it's literally a token in the set, I think is credit to LSS, because this is an incredibly playable bow. It's just unfortunate that you can't use it in Azalea, because then you wouldn't have to do the dance that Azalea has to do. And honestly, that is what makes Azalea a lower tier hero, in my opinion, is having to do the dance to get cards into her arsenal and actually give them Dominate. If you could just Shiver them, then she would shoot up in value as well as far as a playable hero. She still is playable, of course, but, this would have helped. But this is a really, really good card, and I think overpowered in the best of ways. On to a card I really like and I think is a great meme card in Constructed. I think Inspire Lightning's super fun, and I've actually built a Briar deck that is all about arcane damage and playing things like Inspire Lightning at instant speed by making them instants with like the boots. But unfortunately, I just think Inspire Lightning is a little bit too hoopy to jump through. It does deal 3 damage. You do have to have a card alongside of it to fuse. You do have to pitch as well alongside of it to pay the cost of actually playing it, and it blocks 2. And all of that just says it's not really worth going through all those hoops to deal 3 damage. You could just run a 1-cost 3 attack, just attack, At that point, the argument is, of course, yes, it's arcane damage, so your opponent has to plan for it to then be able to block it, versus dropping a card from hand. Yes, you're correct, but this is too many hoops just for that one small benefit that it's arcane damage and not physical. What isn't like underpowered is Blossoming Spellblade. This card is so cool. The many things that you can do with Blossoming Spellblade, well, 1, there's many, and 2, they're all awesome. And the fact that even if you just wanted to play this for a vanilla attack and not try to fuse it, you still get the 2 for 6. And yes, this is sort of the argument I made with Oaken Old, but in reverse. Like, it's a 2 for 6. You're like, okay, the Oaken Old was 3 for 7. Okay, that effect, Oaken Old, was great. I mean, it was literally like blow up your opponent's hand, make them discard 2 or put 2 cards to the bottom of their deck. It, gives +2 and Dominate, so it would have been 9. This, if you fuse, it could just be game winning. Like, this is literally a win condition because of the crazy things that you can do with the effect off of this. If you can Earth and Lightning fuse this card, then you get the 1 arcane damage that your opponent has to account for. If they don't account for it, then you can go and fetch something that pushes your win condition down the way. Allows you to like attack more on a turn. This is basically one of those cards that once your opponent plays it, you have to completely deal with. Otherwise, you could just lose the game, depending on where life totals are. And that's why I think it is overpowered. There were I'm not gonna lie, there were a ton of cards that we could have picked for Runeblade that were in this slot. Like I waffled between like 2 or 3 of them, and I eventually decided Blossoming Spellblade just because I like this card and I think it is overpowered. On to the element cards, the elemental cards, not the element cards, the elemental cards. And I think Exposed to the Elements is underpowered. I don't really know if anyone wants to play this card. I mean, you can. There's some cool constructed combos. I'm not going to discount the fact that there are some cool constructed combos that go along with this, but landing and like lining those combos up doesn't necessarily provide the amount of benefit that you would want to, 1, include this into your deck, and then 2, set that up, in my opinion. And for me, this one's just kind of a miss in general. The fact that you can't even block with it, I think, is the biggest deal. It's at an instant speed, and you kind of have to play it at instant speed. Well, that's not true. You can play this on your turn, but there's some really good trickiness that you can do at instant speed when you play this as an instant, but still, it's just not quite what you'd want to do with a card from your hand. And just keep this in mind. This is not a game with infinite resources or, like a ton of like deck space. Like, oftentimes when you're looking even at classic constructed decks, they're doing something very specific, and there's some tech card like places. There's room for that, of course, and this is definitely a techier card than most. And so it doesn't quite fill the niche of like a main deck, and then playing this in like Blitz doesn't make much sense at all. So yeah, this one just doesn't hit for me. What does is Entwine Earth. Honestly, I could have picked like Entwine Earth or Entwine Lightning. I picked Entwine Earth because Entwine Earth has play as a 2-for-6 in like every hero. If you fuse this, it's like an 8-for-2, which is great. So yeah, like this is a solid element card. I almost picked Fulminate as well because Fulminate is growing in popularity in my mind because you can do some fun stuff with Briar with it. But I think Entwine Earth is just a super solid pick. That and Entwine Lightning, those are both great, fantastic cards. These ones are very overpowered, and if you're playing in like Limited and you see this or Entwine Earth and you're in Draft, you pick these up because they're just easy, like open picks. If you're playing in Sealed, you put them in your deck. I mean, it's just end of story. It's a really good card in Limited. Let's talk about the pulses. I think Pulse of Candlehold is like the least good pulse because all it does is fuse for you, block for 3, and give you some recursion. The recursion can be kind of good because you're basically guaranteeing what you draw into, but at the same time, like it's a very kind of back foot play, you know, because you're setting up for a next turn. The best thing about this is that you can play it down and work towards like a token, like a lightning token, an embodiment of lightning. And for me, it's just like, I don't know. I guess that's fine. The recursion is kind of nice. It's just one of those things where I'm like, I'd rather play the next one. Honestly, you could argue this one. Well, let me talk about the next one first. The next one is Pulse of Isenloft. This card is really good. You want it for fusing, you want it for arsenaling, you want it for blocking big attacks because it's a defense reaction, and it gives a buff to your other cards that are defending if they are earth or ice or elemental. And basically it does everything you would want, like literally everything you'd want for a defense reaction. If you would have asked me this like a month ago, I would have said this was the least interesting, and I was wrong because this is probably the best of the three. You could argue Pulse of Candlehold may have more value than +4 attack at instant speed from Volthaven, but I do think that just pushing instant speed on your like attacks on your next attack is pretty valuable, and this one does have the capacity of just doing nothing after you've played it. If your opponent has all the tempo, you play this down, and you know, like you draw into those cards you put in, and then you have to just like drop them down to block, otherwise you die. So for me, this one is the overpowered one. It's Pulse of Isenloft. And finally, we come to the 3 different elements, starting with, unfortunately, a card that I absolutely love, Tome of Harvests. This is an underpowered Earth card. There's not a lot of underpowered Earth cards, I'm not going to lie. This, to me, is one of them. I really like this card, though. I really like it. Drawing 3 cards is really good, but losing your arsenal and having that conditional effect of having to have an arsenal to lose an arsenal is the tough part. So, like, just thinking theoretically through how this would actually play, it doesn't net you enough benefit in my mind to like really like go for it. I still am going to play this card, and I'm still going to run it because like in specific scenarios and setups, you just get value off of this. Unfortunately, it's not as much value as I wanted, and there are just a ton of really good Earth cards, you guys, like almost all the cards. Maybe you put So Tomorrow here. Maybe So Tomorrow has less value than this one, but I think Tome of Harvests, because I thought it was going to be like up here and it's really like more down here, I put it here instead. Like, I just... hypothetically, here's the problem with it, right? So let's say that you have a 4-card hand and an arsenal. That's a 5-card hand, essentially. You play Tome of Harvests, pitching 3, so that's 2 of your cards, and then you lose the arsenal. So you've given up 3 cards. The card, Tome of Harvests, the card you pitched, and the card in your arsenal. And then you're getting 3 cards back. And so basically this replaces itself, it replaces your arsenal, and it replaces the card that you pitch. And that's not bad, okay? Especially if the card you pitch, being a blue, is like meh, and the card in your arsenal is just arsenal from the previous turn because you're playing like an elemental deck that does a lot of fusing. In that scenario, you're like, yeah, this is generally pretty cool. It doesn't net you more cards than you had previously, though, and that's what makes it a little bit troubling, especially if you don't have blues to pitch for this. If you have Tome of Harvests and like 2 yellows and a red, then like thinking about playing this card is next to impossible. And then looking at like, okay, well, if I'm not going to play it, maybe I block with it. No, it blocks 2, not very good. Play it in Briar, run some blues, then you feel okay. Maybe it blocks more than 2. Play it in Oldham where you already run the blues, and then you're like, I guess I could also just block and attack. So if that's the underpower card, what is the overpower card for Earth? And for me, it's Crown of Seeds. This is the first like legendary equipment we've talked about, and this one is every bit as overpowered as it looks. It does so many things for you. The only thing it doesn't do is block by itself, unless you give it block power by playing Oldham and then by playing Forged for War. You could technically do that. I think that's the one that gives the +2 equipment. Nevertheless, this drops your arsenal in favor of blocking 1 point of damage, and it replaces the arsenal, basically putting it into your hand. And that is incredible. This card is incredible. You can use it offensively to, just drop a card and cycle it if you don't care about your arsenal. You can use it defensively to prevent some like form of unblockable damage or arcane damage, things like that. It has so much playability. I am so glad that I was able to trade for it because I have not opened one myself. This card's real good, and it goes into, basically you consider it in just about anything that can run this card, and that's Briar and Oldham. So you consider it for both of those heroes, and you think maybe I should play this card, and you tinker around with it and see the utility therein. It's a really, really good card. As far as ice cards are concerned, I think Heart of Ice is underpowered. I think it's like best in Lexi, which is weird because it looks like you'd play it in Oldham, and you can play it in Oldham. But I think it's best in Lexi. But outside of that, I think this is a really niche legendary equipment. And if you don't have one, you can get one, and then you can put it in your sideboard, and you can side it in for the Arcane Barrier. Or if you want to play super aggressive as Lexi, then you can, use this effect and keep your opponent who might be playing Control, which is popular right now in the meta. Classic Constructed meta, I think, is shifting more towards Control than anything else. Use this effect and make it hard for your opponent to play defense reactions, things like that. Outside of that, right now, I think it's a little underpowered. The fact that it blade breaks, too, for one, is really, really tough. But a good ice card, and the reason I wanted to make this video, Winter's Bite is so good. Guys, Winter's Bite is so good. This card is so good. We saw it like in Cincinnati, people playing it. We saw it a ton in Orlando, people playing it. Winter's Bite is really solid. If you're playing Control and you want to attack your opponent but not attack your opponent, you play Winter's Bite because their hand is going to be reduced no matter what you do, and so it's easier for you to block. If you want to play aggressively and you want your opponent to struggle against blocking, you play Winter's Bite because it takes away a card from your opponent whether or not they discard or pay the resources. Card's real good, guys. It's real good, and it's one of my favorites. Finally, we have the Lightning. And Blink, to me, and this could be controversial. You might disagree with this. Blink, to me, is underpowered. Gaining the action point at instant speed is cool, and it has its places. But to me, I don't know if I care that much. I know people are putting it in Classic Constructed. I know people are putting it in Lexi decks. I did also put it in my Lexi deck for a little bit, and then I think I'm gonna take it out just to try it without it, because oftentimes here's the reason why. Oftentimes I find myself going, I know exactly the line of play and I have exactly enough action points, and so playing this card basically just pitches 3 and doesn't block for anything because I already have enough action points to do whatever my deck wants to do. My deck is that just generally hyper focused, like Flesh and Blood decks are. And so oftentimes this ends up being one of those things where it's like, yeah, I can fuse with it. Yes, I can play it down. But because I'm playing Lexi, I'm not really getting the value out of it. And it has a little bit more playability in Briar if you wanted to, like fuse with it, then pitch it away and attack. Or if you wanted to play it and then like gain the action point and come in with the sword. Why'd I blank on Rosetta Thorn? But overall, I feel like we can do what this card does without actually running this card. You know what I mean? Like putting this card into your deck is one of those things where like I can already generate the effect without actually playing this card. So it's just one of those scenarios where I don't know if it actually is going to continue to be in decks going forward. I could be wrong. You tell me if I'm wrong in the comments below. And finally, we have Ball Lightning. This is an overpowered card, and I do think that in Limited, this is one of those snap, like, first picks. If you don't pick this and it's in your pack, then I don't know what you're doing. You know, like pack 1. It just makes a ton of sense in Limited. In Constructed, it still makes sense because it has some really, really cool synergies with the heroes that can play it. Briar can do disgusting things with arcane damage and some of her elemental attacks. And just lightning in general is made better by it across the board. You can do some really cool things, like really cool things with this card and like Shock Charmers, or this card and like Electrify, which can be played in both heroes. This card and like a variety of fused arrows is really disgusting. Yeah, it's just solid all around in both heroes, in Lexi and in Briar, and it's worth considering and worth playing just a lot of these cards. The 100% the downside here is that it blocks for nothing. That's like the biggest downside. The fact that it blocks for nothing is literally the only reason why you wouldn't want to put it in your deck. And it's a valid reason, sure. But the upside is there, especially if you're playing in a limited format or like a blitz format where life totals are 20. So that is my list for you of underpowered and overpowered cards. Let me know what you think about this in the comment below. Are there any cards that I missed? Did I miss one? Is there one that you view as more overpowered in each of these card pools? If so, let me know. As always, everybody, thanks for watching.